We are recording. Hello and welcome to Skagit County Track and Field Podcast. This is episode number 9. Our guest today is from Anacortes High School, throws coach Mr. John Ruckdaschel. Coach Ruck, thank you very much for being here with us.
Hey, this is fun to be on. All I'm going to do is be thinking about how the head coach did and comparing myself to him and thinking if I did better. So
Okay.
I can't wait to razz Brad a little bit.
Okay, well the bar's been set high by Brad. He's been our best rapid fire question answerer.
Oh, that's going to be my weakness. Don't tell me that.
Hey, before we jump too far into this, we are recording this. This is for the listeners. We're recording this on December 4th, and something big at Anacortes High School happened on December 2nd. Football team state champs, a 60-30 victory. A lot of track kids on that team. Coach Ruck, how was morale at school today? Pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm at the middle school, so I definitely hear it through the younger kids, and those kids definitely look up to those football players. They're Greek gods to them, basically. So all the kids on the team are going D1, and they love all of them. But generally speaking, yeah, in our staff meeting in the morning, it was brought up that they won the state championship. Like everywhere you go, people who probably have never watched a football game before are talking about how awesome it is. So it's been really cool for our community. Those guys put in a lot of hard work. And we're all really, really proud of them. It's cool.
Yeah, and hopefully that trickles down and those winning mindsets and winning ways, carry over into to your guys' winter sports and specifically into your track season. I mean, unless you're against us, then I don't want it to run over too much, but against everybody else, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think we're hoping to have a lot of the guys that came out for us last year for the first time, and we're also on the football team, be back out. They really are difference makers for us. I really think that on the guys' side, there's a real strong connection between having a quality football program and having a quality track team. You get all of that weight room work in there. You get that toughness. I don't think you can do one without the other.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. Yep. Jake, you want to go 2-minute drill?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this is how we start things off, and it's really just to get us to get a little bit of your background and those that are listening. So if you can kind of give us, you got about 2 minutes, give us the quick and dirty background on your track and field competing and coaching career from high school to present.
So I would say I was probably a marginal athlete at best. There's actually still some evidence of that marginality if you go to athletic.net. I don't know if it was the first year that athletic.net existed, but it was my senior year. So I did football and track in high school. And, I probably did track and field because the head coach told me that I had to, the head coach for football. And that's, probably how a lot of kids end up out at track. And I was not very good, probably my freshman, sophomore, junior year. Senior year, it said my best throw for shot was 42.10.5. And for discus, it was 121.9. The 121.9 took place at Skagit Valley Championships, the 100th Skagit Valley Track and Field Championships. And I was 8th place. So, I scored 1 point. So that's great. Yeah, so that pretty much sums up my track and field experience in high school. It was one of those things that I did. I had fun, doing a co-ed sport's a good time. Football, I was definitely more involved with. And, I looked at doing college for football. And I think at that point, I realized how much more work that was going to be. And I was happy to be done. And then as far as coaching goes, I graduated from Western with a degree in psychology and had no idea what I wanted to do with that. And so when I got home, the coaches got in touch with me after my first year being home, and they had me start coaching football. So I coached football actually from 2011 to 18. And then a couple years after that, I started coaching track. And that was, one of those things where the head coach was my weightlifting teacher at the high school. and it's hard to come by throwing coaches. He knew I threw, so he was like, "Hey, you should do this." So I said, "Sure." Even when it was the first time I realized, I think, where even if you've done a sport, it doesn't mean you know how to coach it. It's just so much different. All those technical details and trying to consider training schedules and all that kind of stuff. So I started coaching track in 2014 and have been doing it ever since. And then I started cross country in 2019 as well. So, the uncommon combination of football and cross country. Being
Yeah.
a coach.
Yeah. You're probably definitely the only coach in the county that's doubled in both those two fall sports. Yeah.
I'll take that honor.
Okay.
Hey, I'm with you there, Coach Ruck, on that one. So I've coached both. So
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Oh,
Just
okay.
not in the county. Yep. That's good.
Yep, not in the county. Yeah.
Have you ever had someone though at a cross country meet come up to you when you're in the coach's line for food and say, "Hey, what are you doing here? You look like you're more of a throwing coach."
Yep. 100%.
That was nice.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Jeez.
that.
You
That was a
should
see home parent, of course.
I was just gonna say, of course. They're not judgmental at all up there.
No.
Okay, so you said 2014. So this will be year 10 for you on the track side of things coming up, yeah?
Yeah, it feels
Okay.
like it's been a lot longer than that, but I think that's just because sometimes track is like hitting your head against a wall.
Yeah, agreed. In your 10 years of coaching, you've done, primarily, like you said, with the throws. What's the best part about coaching the throws in our county?
In our county, it's not like there hasn't been turnover, but the coaches that do stay around, they're familiar faces. There's a real family atmosphere, I feel like, as far as being willing to help each other. Like I know I could talk to any of the throwing coaches if I had something weird going on with an athlete that I couldn't figure out. And I wouldn't feel weird being like, "Hey, what do you do in this case?" I feel like track and field generally is pretty open to that, working with each other, because we're a niche sport, despite being, I think, the highest participation sport in the nation. So that part of it, where I feel like all the coaches at all the schools in our county are super helpful towards each other. There's no secrets. Like at one point when we were remodeling our school, we were practicing at LaConner. I don't know if you remember that.
I do,
if you were
that's
still
right.
there at the time. That was interesting. But Peter was super gracious. Just, hey, told me where stuff was at and was super helpful. So there's definitely that part of it. And then obviously the county meet itself is a big part of that equation. And it's super competitive, super competitive in the county, in a way where you really want to beat the other people, and the athletes really want to beat each other. But at the same time, it's really funny how so many of the athletes are friends with each other and they're hanging out, talking to each other, and then they go in there and it's game face and they try to throw. That's super cool to me. It's everybody kind of knows each other a little bit, at least.
Yeah. And do you right now, like in the last couple of years, do you have more kids that are generally a disc kid and then a shot kid, or do most of them throw both?
It really depends on the kind of athletes we get. And if they're football players going to come throw, they're probably a shot and a disc kid. I definitely would get some javelin kids, so then I try to make into discus throwers as well. There's a real like calculus sort of jigsaw of trying to figure out who could do what. Shot put, you're probably not going to be a javelin thrower. It's not like I've not seen it or not had it, but if you can do a long throw, you could probably do the other one. And so I don't like having a kid do all three unless they're just, unless they're really special. In a lot of ways special mentally, and being able to handle all the details of that, because all three of the throws are extremely, excuse me, like detail oriented, and you've got to be really patient and be coached to do any of them, but to do all three is really tough. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does for sure. Yeah, I was just kind of getting, and I know it changes year to year, but I think it's the same everywhere. Usually, if you're throwing one, you're throwing at least two, but probably not all three. So I was just seeing if we're kind of in the oddity there, if that's kind of typical for everybody.
Well, and I would say that my process often for getting kids to throw has to do with, I definitely recruit outside of track, but then recruiting within track, uh, you kind of got to listen to the kids and kind of hear what their experience is with their other events they're doing. And if they're not having a great experience, say sprinting or doing horizontal jumps or whatever it is, it probably means that they're at least kind of explosive. And I could probably do something with that.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to feel like if they're doing one of those other events that, they're having a bad experience. So, if I think I can make that better, then I'm going to try to convince them to throw. So I definitely have told some kids that, hey, right now, how far you're jumping is 12th best on our team. And I could just about guarantee that I can get you to sub districts. And kids were surprised by that. I mean, with throwing especially, there's, I think, a certain stereotype of body type that are in people's heads for what a thrower should look like. And anytime I try to tell a kid they should throw, it's sort of like, well, I have really small arms. and it just, I just don't even care how skinny their arms are. That does not matter. I've seen so many 5'11", blonde-haired, cross-country looking runners from Linden Christian pop a shot that's 3 feet past where my kids are throwing. Like they look like they should be doing the 1600 meters. It's just it doesn't matter what you look like.
Yeah. Good. So let's get into events, that segment a little bit further. So we have a new segment that we didn't prep you for. I hope you're okay with it. It's kind of rapid fire-ish, but this is called Agree or Disagree. So Jake and I, first off, I'll preface this by saying my depth of knowledge in the throws is not super deep. So we're going to make a couple just generalized statements about the throws, and then you are going to tell us whether you agree with that statement or disagree with it, and maybe a quick follow-up sentence as to why. Are you good?
I love it.
Okay.
Brad often he just comes over and tell my kids to throw farther. So I think that's
there you go. Hey, my high school high jump coach just told me to jump higher. That was his coaching point every time I was at a meet. Which at the time I was like, you're not really giving me much, but when I started coaching high jump, I was like, at a meet, that's literally one of the best things you could say, because if you say anything else, you're gonna block that kid's head and they're not gonna do well. So he would just be like, jump higher. I don't have anything else to tell you. So
I mean, and absolutely, there's such a difference. There's practice coaching and there's like meet day coaching, and they couldn't look any different from each other.
Yep, 100%. All right, so we'll knock this off. So we'll make a statement. You essentially say agree versus or disagree. And again, don't judge us, because I think I can speak for myself. The only thing I have never coached in track and field is throws. I've literally coached everything else. Okay, so first thing, all throwers should sprint train.
Agree.
Okay, why do you agree?
So you got some kids who they're going to come in and sprint train and they're probably going to get hurt. So you kind of it's got to be pretty easy and pretty gradual. But in my program, there is always some form of sprinting. Like we start where it's pretty easy, a couple of days of sprinting a week, and it's maybe doing 5 20-meter sprints, and that's it. The reason to incorporate sprinting is similar to like why you'd want to do power cleans. Like it's a total body explosive thing, and the only difference is that they're doing sprints for a long period of time and we're sprinting for 1 foot. So you definitely need to do sprints. I probably don't do them as much as some coaches do. There's definitely an aspect to some kids. I don't know if it's from their other sports, but they come in and they're already a little bit banged up. And I'm not trying to increase that wear and tear, because there's so much repeated movements in in the throws that if you've already got some soreness or weakness coming in, and you start doing a lot of pounding, especially on big bodies, you're going to get some kids that are going to get hurt. So you've really got to ease into it. But I believe in sprinting for sure.
Okay, this kind of also goes along with that.
And hey, sorry, one
no
thing
worries.
I'll add in there is that like javelin, and I know you guys want me to focus on shot and disc, but like javelin,
No worries.
more so than the others, like I really think if you're throwing javelin, you should just be a sprinter as well. Not only because it's going to help you, but I've seen so many times where a kid is a part of the sprinting program and they're a javelin thrower, and that's what they do, and they'll have a great year. The next year, they've decided they're only a javelin thrower now, and they just don't have the same quick twitch right at the finish. You can see it, and at the start, they all kind of start the same, but by the end, it's kind of sad. You kind of realize that there was a missed opportunity there, because a lot of the times, people like to throw javelin. It feels fun and easy, but they don't want to do something that's kind of challenging like sprinting.
Yeah, I love that answer. That's good.
Yeah, 100%. All right, this goes on to weight training is a must for all throwers.
100%. Yep. Gotta do weightlifting, and I'll say weightlifting of some kind. Weightlifting can look like medicine ball, explosive, sort of pushing and throwing, and rotational around the core. It doesn't have to be in the weight room. I've had a lot of kids who maybe had reported back issues. It's hard to confirm sometimes what an injury is and is not, but I've had kids that doing just the medicine ball work, and I say medicine ball, but we do not have access to the medicine balls at the high school. So I took an old set of plastic weights, they're filled with concrete, and we just have those down the shed. And so we'll do hammer throws over the shoulder and all kinds of stuff to get us being explosive, pushing weights in a different way other than just right here with shot or discus. So to me, that would involve weightlifting, or that's weight training. I would rather also get them in the weight room as well. Sometimes I got to work with some kids because they've got a weightlifting class, or they go to weightlifting in the morning for football. And in some ways I really like that because I know they're doing good stuff in both of those, and it cuts my day down, makes it shorter, so I don't have to be at practice till 6:30. Yeah. Otherwise, you've got to lift, especially for shot. You just can't throw it far enough if you aren't strong. You got to be strong, especially for guys.
Okay, agree or disagree with this? All throwers should be taught the glide and the spin and the shot put, but what they end up using in competition is up to them or unique to them.
Agree, kind of.
Disclaimer.
The disclaimer is that I don't think I would ever, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not going to profess to know everything, but I wouldn't want to teach a kid glide and rotational shot put at the same time. My philosophy would be start them with glide, and that might be starting them their freshman, sophomore, and maybe even junior year. And you can tell often what sort of athlete they are, if they're a rotational athlete or a linear athlete, so like straight line. And you can find that out from some of the stuff they do in shot put. And then you can make the transition eventually, because with shot put, it's all about getting a good block at the finish. And when you do the glide shot put, you can really feel the block where your left side stops and the right side continues. Whereas when you're doing rotational, it's really easy to just spin as fast as you can and go right through the block, not feel it, and just pop it out there. But if you can feel the block in that, it's going to be so much stronger. Like, I don't know how much you guys follow Olympic throwers, but like Ryan Krauser is the greatest to ever do it. And it's in part because of the unique rotational way that he throws. He was originally a glider, and then he almost finishes the way a glider would finish, but he starts the way a rotational shot putter would. So
Is that what they're calling like the Krauser step now? Because I remember watching him through the meets leading up to Budapest, and they said that he's got a new throwing technique, even though he had the world record already. And I'm thinking to myself, why the hell would you switch a technique if you already had the world record? But I guess we saw why. Is that kind of what he's doing?
The Krauser step is more back of the circle stuff. I'm thinking more about when he crosses the circle, he becomes super linear down the line. Like if you draw a backward 7, normally you want to drive right down that line if you were thinking about discus, because that's kind of your line of power. And he's really good at turning rotational into straight line linear speed, to the point where his finish, he gets in such a great position that it looks like how it would in some ways for a glide shot putter versus Joe Kovacs is just a super traditional rotational thrower. He's shorter. That's often why someone would try to rotate to get more speed out of it, and not nearly as linear as Krauser's. And also, I would say glide is so simple. But you have to master the parts of it. And if you don't, it won't go far. And versus rotational, you can be a little bit sloppy with it, but because you get the extra really distance essentially in that rotation, you can get it to go further, but you're going to be more inconsistent. So it's a real case by case thing with kids. I'm not the best at coaching rotational shot put because I never did it. And so I've had to kind of adapt because it's not the same as rotational discus. It's a smaller circle. So you've got to do it a little bit differently. And sometimes kids can't do disc and a rotational shot at the same time. It messes with their discus form. So you got to be careful about it.
Yeah. There's a lot to that. That's good. Okay. Last agree or disagree. For the listeners, a lot of times at our league meets, we get 4 attempts and it's usually open pit. Okay. So here's your agree or disagree. In these open pit meets, it is better to throw all 4 of your discus attempts all at once, one after the other, rather than maybe say 2 sets of 2 throws with a break in between.
Disagree. It is so much better to throw 2 and 2.
Good.
Yeah, there's some kids who, you've seen it, I'm sure. They make up something in their head that because one time I did really well throwing all 4 in a row, I need to do that every time from here on out. And I really like the ability with the 2 and 2 to get one throw in there because you're kind of getting the nerves out. And then that second one, hopefully they can refocus themselves and realize it's just another throw, just like if we're at practice. But then in between, hopefully that if there's any major issues as a coach, you can sort that out with them. And if they have any issues that maybe are going on in their head, they can help themselves calm down. Doing all 4 in a row is, I tell every kid not to do that. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but yeah.
Yeah. I think we're on the same page with that. Jake, you want to get into the shot and disc section?
Yeah, and actually, I'll probably ask this leaning a little bit more towards the disc, since you kind of answered some of the technical aspects of the shot in the agree to disagree. So what are the top 3 technical aspects of the discus? Now, if you think they sort of align in terms of shot and disc, feel free to kind of put that together. But I would like to hear a little bit more about the discus side of it. So what are the 3 technical aspects of this event that you think athletes must be mindful of?
Yeah. If I had to pick a event that I coach that I enjoy the most, it would be discus. So I am perfectly happy to talk about discus. So one technical aspect that they both throw or both share is needing to have a strong left side block, where that left side of your body is, we call it a car crash. It's stopping all momentum. When in a car crash, if you don't have your seatbelt on, you're being ejected. We want to turn the discus into you if you're not wearing a seatbelt. We want to eject the disc from all that momentum you created. And with the discus, it's a little different from the standpoint of you can create a lot of speed with your left arm, and everyone tries to throw it with their right if you're a right-handed thrower. So they will get in there, and you'll see kids where the left arm isn't used at all, and they're just turning in the circle with their right arm, and they throw it and they dip at the end, and it's probably a terrible flight. If you just focused on that left arm and you think about throwing it as hard as you can, it's going to go so much further. If you were to think about trying to spin in a circle as fast as you could with your arms in or with your arms out, you're going to spin a lot faster like this and then bring it in at the end. So if that right arm's just there, you're not gonna get that rotational speed you're looking for. The thing I kind of mentioned right there is disc flight. If it's the thing that I think that beginners often struggle with the most, and that's getting it to fly well, spin it off your pointer finger. You're going to get a lot of kids that are throwing it off maybe this finger or that finger. Some of the kids, it goes out the back of their hand instead of out the front. And so I spend so much time working with kids on that technical aspect of it. And it's funny, just every kid is a little bit different on the cue language that helps them to fix whatever that flight thing is. I know for myself, if I have my fingers spread out, that disc will start to drift back onto that one. But if I put them together and I kind of keep it separate, the rest of the fingers separate, but those two are almost glued together, that'll help encourage that disc up into the front of the hand. A lot of it does have to do with the pressure and where the disc is in your hand, back of it versus front of the hand. Just little things like that kids can get super sloppy on, and all of a sudden the disc wobbles out and you lose so much distance when it's a bad flight. And the final part, I would say, thinking about three technical aspects, would be separation between shoulder and hip. So be your right shoulder and your left hip. You want them essentially to be as far away from each other as possible. And when I say shoulder, it's really like our right hand. And so when you are just even doing like a standing throw where you aren't rotating, it's a great opportunity to practice that discus reaching back behind and high pointing it, because whatever happens in the back is going to continue into the front. And so when we create that separation to start, we want to continue to keep that separation by having the hips sprint or move before that hand starts to come through. So we're essentially running away from the disc with the lower half of our body and keeping that right disc behind our right hip. As soon as we get the left or the right hand out in front, the disc hand, the throwing hand, then we lose our ability to drive our hips into the throw. So those three are sort of those ones where it's like, hey, if I'm going to have an issue that causes the greatest loss of distance, it's probably something related to those. And those, for the most part, you can work on and are not even related to doing a full throw from the back. And all the kids want to do a full throw, but you can throw really far if you just have really good technique and you just stand in the front of the circle. As far as the shot, I would just say being super linear with your right side for the glide. That left side block and the timing of it is super important. And then continuing with the idea of being linear with the right leg hip drive. That right leg, again, has to stay in front of the upper body. If it doesn't, then you're leaning over. The height starts to get messed up too as far as your release angle. Oh, man, you guys are giving me a little PTSD right now, thinking of all the bad things that could happen with throwing.
That's what we're here for. So
yeah.
So I got one real quick. I'm going to modify kind of the question here because we're running out of time with you, and we do want to get the rapid fire because you're an interesting guy, and you have something sort of interesting that you do. So if in sort of a minute, really quick, in terms of your practice scope, where does competition fit into your practicing outside of meets? Do you create that atmosphere in your practice schedule, and how often do you do that? If you can touch on that quick, and then we'll go to rapid fire, and then we'll be done with you.
That's a really good question. I've actually been realizing more and more how important competition is in practice. And um, this last season, I tried to incorporate, I guess you could call them games, but they're ways for kids to compete with each other. Um, as the season goes on, things that are new, sometimes you start to to phase out. And so some of the games I did early on, I ended up not doing as the season went on, but um, it's definitely something in my mind that's a real important thing, because the monotony of practice can be um, pretty overwhelming when you're doing the same thing over and over again. Uh, you know, I'm sure Brad talked about, we do sort of heptathlon at
Mhm.
one point, and so that's definitely program wise a competition thing for us. Um, but within the throwing program, I need to come up with more ways to compete. Something that we do in javelin is we do some target practice, and we try to hit some fruit out there in the field to try to see who can get closest to the fruit. Like watermelons are pretty good for that. Uh, yeah, I think that's about it. I mean, we did this thing where it was like trying to push each other with our hands and try to get the other person out of the circle. That was one of the competition things we did last year, and that was pretty
Nice.
fun.
Nice.
Definitely going to bring that back out. I thought I was going to injure a couple athletes when I did that, so you know, um,
Get those inflatable
definitely going to.
sumo suits, and then you'd be
Yeah,
good.
we're definitely going to keep working on the competition aspect. Do you guys do some sort of fake competition type things like that yourselves?
Well, in our world, it's a little different because we time every single thing that we do. So like when we're doing
Sure.
sprints, let's say we're doing 40s on the turn, every single rep is timed. So their competition is either between themselves to try to better their time each time or against somebody else. And then we kind of make that into an Excel sheet, and then we post that through the Remind app, so that way everybody kind of sees the results at the end. So yeah, we do, but I would say with the throws, kind of like the jumps, because we both do jumps too.
Yeah.
That mental aspect in between attempts, especially at big meets where you're actually in an order, and then you've got finals coming up, and maybe the order switched, is huge, and something that we don't do a good enough job of. I think.
Well, I think Coach Hunks does a really good job of that. Like our throw coach Drew, he actually has certain points during the season where he basically says you get 3 throws a day at practice, and it's specific, it's meant to be in order, and so he's putting a little bit of pressure on him. So he's done a really good job of building that in this past season, and I'm sure he's going to be doing it again this season. And again, he doesn't do it every week, but he's kind of got it built in where he makes them, forces them not to just go out there and throw it 15 times. So they got to have a specific point to it. So I would say that's been one of the cooler things we've seen him do. Well, hey, I know you got to get out of here, and it's getting close to your departure time. So I think Johnny, if we're right, we'll jump right into rapid fire.
Yeah, and for the listeners, Coach Ruck has a podcast with two other fellow coaches from Anacortes, Coach Swap, baseball coach, and Coach Morgenthaler, coaches basketball. And so your rapid fire, Coach Ruck, is all themed around your The View from the Rock podcast. Are you ready for your rapid fire?
All right,
Man,
now,
I cannot
we'll be
wait.
honest with you. Nobody's done a better job at this except for Brad. So he's the only one that's actually given us only a one-word answer without any explanation. So we're looking for one word, and then we're moving on. So pop to the head.
You could tell already from how I talk, that is a struggle. There's so many questions here that we missed out on. Like
there is.
Like who my influences are. I would just
Yes.
say one thing that we didn't get to talk about that I care a lot about is like sports psychology, because my degree's in that. So like mental health and preparing yourself like mentally for competition. So one of the books that I would recommend to anyone, I think, because it's totally applicable, is The Inner Game of Tennis. It's by Timothy Galway, and it has
I've
to
bought
do
that.
with.
I just have not read it. I'm glad you said that.
Oh man, I'm going to add that
so
to the
good.
list. All right.
Yeah,
it's so good.
Inner Game of Tennis. Okay.
The Inner Game of Tennis, and didn't Pete Carroll write the foreword for that? Or am I making that up? I don't know.
I think you're making that up.
Okay.
But
thanks for calling me out.
No, hey, I don't know. It could be.
Okay. All right. Rapid fire question number one. You guys have a segment on the View from the Rock podcast where you do a beer of the week. So I want to know, what's your favorite style, not your favorite specific beer, but like in general, your favorite style of beer.
IPA.
Okay. Your favorite top 3 list ever discussed on your podcast.
Top 3 barbecue foods.
I gotta find that episode. Good.
Okay, who would be your all-time guest to have on the podcast? Like, and you can go as far-reaching as you'd want. Who would you want to have interviewed on the podcast?
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
All right.
Yes.
Love it. All right. Last one. And you guys talk about football on there and obviously about Huskies football. Who's the greatest Husky football player?
So I would love to get a multi-word answer here. Jake Locker.
Okay.
Love it.
Hey,
love
you did a great job with rapid fire. Anacortes
yes.
is now the number one on the rapid fire. They're the only ones who follow the instructions.
Hey, I'm a rule follower.
There you go. Doing something right over there. Yeah.
Coach Ruck, we appreciate you coming on and sharing some insight, especially to the world of throws. Sometimes, that's an event that a lot of people look at and, it's going on all track meet. I don't know how much interest a lot of people go over there, but, I think the amount of detail that you talked about, I learned a ton, and we appreciate you coming on and sharing some of that with us.
Yeah, I am happy to be on here anytime. I love talking about the nitty-gritty details. We got to hear more details from you guys, though. We got to start questioning you. We need an episode where we do the rapid fire and all that stuff for you guys.
Hey, we're trying to extend some seasons on this, so it might be season 2. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Love it.
We'll just keep saying that anyway.
Your podcast one more time.
Our podcast is called The View from the Rock, and you can find that on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts.
All right, there you go.
Cool. Tell your co-hosts we said hi.
All right.
Sounds good. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Coach Ruck.